I ask you, what is misinformation? In what way or ways does it differ from disinformation? Are the two terms not perfectly synonymous? Might we not apply the one and then the other and then the one again without any loss or change in meaning? In short, the answer is no. Misinformation and disinformation are most decidedly different. This might come to you, as it came to me, as a bit of a surprise. For over the course of the past few years, we've witnessed a confounding of and a confusion about these two distinct and, most importantly, non-interchangeable terms. You hear one or the other spoken by our putative thought leaders, those brilliant pundits behind whom we're supposed to get in line, without any real effort to differentiate their meaning. And worse, depending on the political agenda of the person by whom said, there seems to be a concerted aim to disparage, to discredit, to delegitimize and contemn the opponent for whose contrary opinion he simply can muster no tolerance. His opinion is rather perfunctorily yet always damningly cast as yet another ugly species of misinformation, that raving beast through which he must run the tip of his sword or the point of his pen. So what's the difference between misinformation and disinformation? Put simply, misinformation is incorrect information merely. It's the kind of information behind which there's no nefarious scheming, no goal to occlude or to misrepresent the truth. Indeed, it strays by some degree from the straight and narrow path of the truth, but this deviation isn't in the least bit deliberate. Take the following as an example. If I were to be told by a well-meaning but hopelessly historically illiterate friend, of which we all have one or two, that Christopher Columbus, with the financial backing of the English crown, arrived at the West Indies in the year 1482, then both he and I would be woefully misinformed. Now, my friend, so far as I know, his character has never revealed himself to be a duplicitous fellow. He may be uneducated, he may be ignorant, but he is overall earnest. Surely then it wasn't his intention to deceive me, yet he told me two things contrary to fact. One, that Columbus sailed under the flag of England, and two, that he arrived 10 years prior to the date that he actually did. Of both these things, and of the story of Columbus more generally, I've been misinformed. The purpose of disinformation, on the other hand, is deliberate deception. This variety of information is deliberately, knowingly, and yes, often maliciously false. Continuing with our example of Columbus, it would be disinformation if a university professor, upon whom presumably some mark of erudition had been stamped and some assortment of degrees and qualifications conferred, were to tell me that Columbus sailed to Hispaniola not to penetrate the Orient and gain Western access to its fragrant bounty of trade, but rather for the morally repugnant reason of enslaving the native Carib population. The professor, of course, knows better. He's promulgated this narrative in order to deceive his credulous class. Now, this account of Columbus is deliberately false and thus belongs to the category of disinformation. So again, to review, misinformation is merely incorrect. The error isn't purposive. Disinformation, however, is deliberately false. The untruth is willfully deceptive. The former is the less pejorative, the more forgivable of the two. All right, so I think we have a good understanding of the difference between misinformation on the one hand and disinformation on the other. I'd now like to use these two terms and apply them to the COVID-19 pandemic and demonstrate how there is a place for both. Let's review a few examples, shall we? Now, beginning with the more innocuous of the two, we were, very early on, misinformed of a great many things. Perhaps the single most important feature about this disease, about which we were all collectively misinformed, was the manner by which it spread. Was it transmitted by droplets, expectorated and sneezed out into the air, or was it airborne, independent of the conveyance by these tiny nasal particles? Could it linger undetected on our countertops? Could it make a home of our door handles? Or could it encrust the cardboard of our many Amazon deliveries? We were misinformed of the rapidity with which it could spread in an outdoor setting. It appears most energetically, and yes, unfortunately, lethally, to dash about within the confines of an enclosed space. We were misinformed of the efficacy of cloth masks, those feeble facial coverings, those oral ornaments through and around which, with scant little resistance, these dangerous, nimble little virions unhesitatingly danced. Of all these things, and yes, many more, we were, at one time, misinformed. Back then, at the pandemic's outset, we were afflicted by incorrect information to which only time and further research and investigations could really offer a cure. Now, let's look at a single example of disinformation, actual, not alleged disinformation, as it pertains to the COVID-19 pandemic. Early on in the pandemic, when inquiring eyes were beginning to shift their focus away from the wet market menagerie of pangolins and bats toward the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a facility out of which this novel pathogen is most likely to have leapt, a government official in China, a member of the Chinese Communist Party, offered this response. Said Zhao Lijian, "It might be U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan." He then exhorted America to be transparent, make public your data. U.S. owe an explanation. You see, the claim or the suggestion that the American Army is culpable for having seeded the bucolic, tranquil town of Wuhan with this deadly virus is, by any measure, disinformation. It's the type of information whose animating purpose, whose sole design is to sow discord. Now, I don't mean to belabor the point, but this is a distinction about which I can't be too emphatic. Misinformation and disinformation are not at all the same thing. They are not synonyms. Misinformation is incorrect information merely. Disinformation is the deliberate intent to deceive, and it's typically politically motivated. The spread of misinformation from an otherwise ignorant person is no great moral shortcoming. It's not something for which a person should be punished or censored, but rather he should be educated. He should be further enlightened to the truth. To spread disinformation, however, is to bear some sinful weight. I hope this little video was both clarifying and beneficial. Now I ask you to go forth. I want you to be acutely aware of anyone who tries to conflate misinformation and disinformation. The one is forgivable, the other less so. And as always, to my precious few subscribers, viewers, and friends, thank you so much. Thank you sincerely for patronizing this page, for spending a little bit of time with me and indulging in hearing what I have to say. And don't be shy, comment below. Let me know, what are your favorite examples of misinformation, of disinformation, whether they pertain to the COVID-19 pandemic or to any point of time. Fare thee well, adieu. I will see you next time on Finneran's Wake.